We're going to talk about them, and I got a couple of questions, but we're going to also open it up for you if you have any questions for these three, hopefully, boards at Promara. So let's get started. So I'm going to start this off with your question. And Jeremiah, sir. Right, or is he there? So in your presentation, you didn't really get into the Shroud, so 22, 23. Okay, what happened?
Specifically, I was being interviewed by Sean McDowell. Sean's dad, Josh McDowell, wrote a book called Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And in one of the iterations of Evidence That Demands a Verdict, Josh appealed to the carbon dating of the Shroud to say that it was a hoax and a forgery and Christians should really not have anything to do with it. I'm paraphrasing. And based on that popular book by Josh McDowell, the evangelical community sent the Shroud world or Shroud studies into the oblivion. I mean, it just said, we're not interested based on this popular book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. Now, subsequent copies of Evidence That Demands a Verdict, books come out, as you know, with different rewrites and revisions. Subsequent copies no longer have that excursus on the Shroud in them, but I have the actual copy that does. And Sean McDowell is interviewing me about my book, Body of Proof, the 7 Best Reasons to Believe in the Resurrection of Jesus and Why It Matters Today. And this video has many views now. And this is, I say this to my own embarrassment, Chuck. I was asked about the Shroud by Sean, Josh's son. Great, Fart. Thank you for joining us, my friend. And y'all, you can find the video. I very skeptically, in a highbrow way, respond to it. And I say to my own shame and ask for forgiveness here at Crowd Conference. Because I was very dangerous. I have a very uninformed opinion. And that was in 2023, January of 2023. Can you imagine that? They're just 2.5 years late. And that's where my skepticism, I had an uneasy feeling when I got off that video and interview, and I thought I need to start reading this for myself. So that's when I began to read it for myself instead of just going with the footnote of the Joshua McDowell video.
But, all right, I will follow on to that, but let's hear the rest of these stories first. So Mark Antonacci decided to join us, so many on.
I was lost, but now I found.
Again, author, Shroud expert, I think these guys was terrific. So we're basically asking what happened what was going on when you first heard about the Shroud and kind of pulled you in.
I was just had an argument with a girl I was dating, and it was over the fact that she was a Christian and I was agnostic, and it was a big deal for her. And I could tell this is something that would threaten the relationship right off the bat. And so I thought, well, I'm not gonna stick around hard, but I'm gonna go to the office and get some work done. Well, it was Saturday, no deadline hanging over your head. I'm still thinking about yard one, so I thought I'd go across the street and have lunch. And I found, I'll shorten this. And I found the old book, old Democrats that would published it on Saturday. Their weekend sports edition came out, and so I grabbed that paper, which I rarely ever read, the Globe. And so I'm going down the counter, and Habermas and Stevenson's book had just come out for his own The Shroud, and they had a picture of the man in the Shroud. You know how a picture looks like he's looking right at you? I'm going down the aisle, and I say, "That hurts." I said, "Gee, you look Drex, this is all you." And I was right to 100% right in my sarcasm. And then I went to sit down and read the sports page, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this guy looking at me. And 3 different times I push it farther away, and times I just throw it down and read it, and oh my gosh, it's about some of the finest scientists in the world, or at least with some finest institutions, had just all this unforgeable evidence. And so I'm back in the apartment, pacing more furiously than ever, And, but finally it hit me mid-step. What is that? What's the problem there? This isn't bad news, this is possibly good news. And then I went out on the book. And a few months later, Reverend Joe Marino, and I caught everything in the English language from him.
I had a follow-up for you too. So Joe Marino, tell us what happens.
Well, my story goes back to spring of 1977. I'd been out of high school about 5 years. Didn't know what I wanted to do in life, so I got a job with the federal government for a while, and it was probably a dead-end street, but I was tired of school and stuff. That for a couple years, all I did was, even out of just the newspaper, I only read like the comic section and the sports page, and eventually I thought, I gotta get on the ball here and do more than that. And I had become agnostic out of high school, and I started mid to late 70s. I started reading anything with religion and philosophy, in any religion and philosophy. I gone to Catholic grade school and high school, but I kind of dismissed all that and start from scratch, so to speak. And so when I go to a bookstore, I'd always go to the religion and philosophy section first. So it was March 1977, and I went to the old Jamestown Mall in Florissant, not too far from here. And I went to the Walton bookstore, and in the religion section, there was a book called The Fifth Gospel. Is this the face? And it said the subtitle was, "Is this the face of Jesus Christ?" And it had a picture of the negative of just the face, and that face just enthralled me. And I bought the book. It was a paperback, probably paid $1 and a quarter these days, and brought it home and read it in one sitting. And that was the year before Sturk went over to study it. So there wasn't a whole lot of information in the United States. I mean, it was well known in Europe, France, Italy, Spain, that sort of thing, but not very well known in the United States. So I read the book and was just fascinated by it. I literally read it in one sitting, and started collecting articles and books and stuff, and eventually started contacting Shroud organizations, and got the old 35 millimeter slides, another obsolete format, to be able to give slide lectures. And it was actually a impetus for me to kind of come back to my roots, my faith roots. And I ended up joining a monastery for a while. So I was convinced when I read that book, even though the evidence wasn't that strong at that time, that just based on the evidence, there was a very good chance that the Shroud was authentic. And then in 1978, Sturk went over to Turin, and then all their testing and things started coming out in the press, one after another. And in 1981, Sturk concluded that the Shroud was not the product of an artist. There was real human blood on it. And I've always kept up to the minute on the Shroud, as a lot of you know. And nothing's convinced me that it's not authentic. I mean, Russell give a percentage of what an artist might have been able to do. I'm in the 100% range. I'm 100% convinced that it's authentic, and I get a possible artist 0%.
Russ Breault, nothing but the Utica College.
Well, I was roped up here on the panel because my dad was professing atheist, and so I adopted his atheism, and so all through high school and college, and but at the age of 23, obviously God had another plan, and it's so. But to be honest with you, the shroud had nothing to do with my coming to faith. I actually stole a Bible from a hotel room. Said he. So, but a year and a half later, I hear about all these scientists going to Turin that are going to study a religious artifact that purported to be the pearl shroud of Jesus. And so I got excited about the shroud, not for my faith, but the fact that I didn't have any Christian friends. I didn't have all my people I knew growing up, even my entire family were all a bunch of agnostics, atheists. And so I looked at the shroud as a vehicle. How am I going to reach them? And it's so that's how I really. Now I want to share a story. I as some of you know, I lecture all over the country all the time, and I've been out to a Calvary Chapel church on Salt Lake City several times. They have a special mission to the Mormons out there, and it's and at any rate, I was out there, and then I did this shroud encounter, and I was back out there the very next year, do like an encore event, and I was walking into the foyer of the church, and there's this woman standing there, and she's wearing a postal uniform, and so she's the mail carrier for this church, and so she sees me walking into the church with the pastor. We just got back from lunch. And she looks at me and she's wagging her finger and says, "I know you. You're the shroud guy." And I said, "Guilty as charged." And then so since she said, "Well, I have something to tell you." And I said, "Well, I'd love to hear it." And so she said, "Well, when you were here last year, I don't know what it was, but I gave my life to Christ, and my boyfriend, who I was living with at the time, he came to the Lord. Now we're both married, and we now come to this church." And so I asked her, "What was it about the shroud that was so compelling for you?" This is the phrase that pays right here. She said, "It makes it real." That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. It makes it real. And for so many people, Christianity is a vague abstraction. They can't get their heads around it. They can't comprehend how something that happened 2,000 years ago is even remotely relevant to their lives right now. And so, but when they see the shroud, when they see it, it impacts them. And I tell people all the time, you can go to church and you can hear a sermon or a homily, and by the time you're done with lunch, you've forgotten what was heard, like what you heard. You will never forget the shroud. It will stay with you, and that's the power of it. Thank you.
All right, we're going to open this up for questions too, but Jeremiah, back to you. Okay, 2023.
Yeah, I started to look into this Catholic relic. Was there part of you that did not want to believe?
No, there really wasn't part of me that didn't want to believe it. I just had to get over my allergic reaction of skepticism that was so embedded in me from my training, both with my PhD and then from evangelical circles. And I try not to privilege artifacts. I try not to privilege the text that was beat out of me for 3 years in Oxford. Don't privilege the Bible. Don't privilege the resurrection. Let the evidence lead you. Let your arguments lead you. And so I wouldn't say I was very indifferent to it, more than a desire to wanting it to be true. I wanted to have an answer for why I didn't believe it if I really didn't believe in it. And it was then from January 23, fast forward to Good Friday, Easter 2023, I was asked to give a men's Bible study. We had a large men's group at our church, and at our Friday morning men's Bible study, I simply presented what I had learned. And I joked in one of the sessions or in one of the meetings, when I first started teaching grad school in Canada in in 2012, I was like 1 week ahead of the students, right? That's what it's like the first time. You walk in, you never taught grad school, then you leave if you had taught it. And I was like a week ahead of the students in my grad class. And I had that similar feeling at that Good Friday Friday morning men's Bible study at Prestonwood Baptist Church, where I just saw the impact it was making on my son-in-law, who's cocky. And I thank God. So forgive me for dad crying for a minute, but I looked down. I just had to agree seeing my son watching me. And then it became real for me, Russ. And it was a special moment. And I had a really good talk to my son that morning at breakfast after morning Bible study. And that's why you.
So, Mark, part of you, Alan, to believe this?
Not really. And not after that, I kind of got out of my system. I paced for a couple of hours and it got out of my system. And I don't know why it took me so long to finally go, hey, stupid. What?
This could be good. You told me once, this could be good news.
Yeah. And it sure was. I haven't bought the book yet, but I thought, now what? No, I had everything to get in at this list.
Yeah. Joe, pardon me, I want to believe. I want to believe it.
I was completely open to anything at the time. I was reading Buddhist and not this, you name it, philosophy or religion, I was reading it. So I could have had a real bias against it because I had gone away from my roots. But I was still open to it, and the evidence was enough to convince me that it was probably inauthentic, and I would think I was wrong and have it substitute.
And Russ, what have you not want to believe this, but on with your agnostic relationships?
No, I always accepted that I came because I probably still hold it to this view, because I always like to pull the punches a little bit. I don't like to be overly dogmatic about anything. So in other words, my approach is not I'm going to prove the shroud is authentic and I'm going to prove it to you. Now I'm just going to present the evidence and let you decide. And it's I like to be a little more winsome. I tell people all the time, I'm 90% there. Okay, fine. I'll get 5 or 10%. There's a notion in there. Some alleged medieval artist who predated Leonardo for several hundred years. We don't know who he is. We don't know how he did it. And he never did anything else. I mean, that's conceivable. So I have to give a couple percentages, to that. So that I'm not, but in all likelihood, the shroud is obviously authentic. That's why we're here, and so I'm moved on to rather, of course you have to deal with the science and the history and all that, but I'm much more interested in the purpose of the shroud and in the message of it. Once you come to the realization that John was the first of the apostles to believe in the resurrection, and that belief was based on the evidence of the linen cloth lying there, that we have to ask the question, was it left in the tomb only for the benefit of Peter and John? Or was it left for the benefit of the whole world throughout all generations? And how do you think God works? And it's so then we have to drill down even further and say, well, I don't believe in a God of accidents. I believe if that cloth was left in a tomb, he was left there on purpose. So what's the purpose of it? And I think that's our job, or what is the purpose of the shroud for you? And it's and I say, both John Paul II, he described it as a mirror of the gospel. That's beautiful. You got one thing about being a mirror of the gospel, that you get into this debate whether it's authentic or not. Well, the shroud's a mirror of the gospel, whether it is authentic or not. And so it means, obviously, the extreme light to it is that it is authentic. I don't get into that kind of with the base. I'm more to, what is the message? What is the meaning for us now, for today?
Yeah. Well, if you have any questions, I'm going to ask one more, and then if you have any questions, let us know. We'll be right over. You probably answered this a little bit, but more specifically, Jeremiah, how has this changed you?
Thank you, Chuck, for that question. Studying the resurrection of Jesus Christ is the most fulfilling endeavor one could do, because every shred of evidence for Jesus' resurrection is more evidence for my future resurrection. My resurrection, our resurrection, and Jesus' resurrection are linked. And so it is an extremely fruitful study to look into all of the evidence for Jesus' resurrection. That's embedded in all of that is the future promise of our reigning with him physically, bodily someday. And there's great hope. That's why Paul believes that we should not grieve as those who have no hope. We could grieve in hope. And there's a huge difference of grieving with hope and grieving without hope. Comfort one another with these powerful words, Paul said to the Thessalonian believers. I was just in Thessaloniki a few months ago, using that very passage of how these words of the resurrection bring us hope. 100 times in the New Testament, the word elpis, hope, is used and always tied to the fact of Jesus' resurrection. And so we can be filled with an incredible hope. Not a fatalistic hope, not that we're not present and reading with people, that we have this amazing bedrock hope that Jesus is alive. So I can face whatever I need to face today. I do not face it alone. I believe that's why Paul, after 57 verses of 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 58, could say, therefore, be strong, be immovable, always abounding the work of the Lord, because we know that our labor in the Lord is not in vain. The resurrection shows me that everything I do for Jesus matters. None of it will be forgotten. None of it is wasted. And so, Chubb, that's the impact of the resurrection for me. And the Shroud is certainly a subset of those studies. And it's an amazing one. I'm going to keep saying this. It's the greatest tool for evangelism and discipleship we have. I want believers to be more aware of Jesus' resurrection and their own. We have a huge problem right now. The resurrection is underpreached, it's understudied, it's undertaught, and it's not very well understood by most Christians who have a deer in the headlights look when you ask them why you believe Jesus physically, bodily rose from the grave. What is the evidence for that? Well, we're bringing the evidence using Shroud. And it allows us to talk about all aspects of the gospel. So that's how it's intended to be, Chuck. Thank you for the great question.
Thank you. Mark, how's it changed you?
I agree with everything he said.
See, and that's just a warrior talk.
He gave me a purpose. I had no idea I would stay at this salon. I was going to give a presentation to other lawyers, and those usually last about an hour, and I'm starting to prepare and I'm thinking, God, I can't get all this in one hour, you know. And I go, oh, I know, I'll write a book. That only take me a year, you know. And I just got deeper and deeper and deeper into it, and I had to keep. And now it's like a guy swimming across the lake, and he's 3/4 of the way there. Well, he's got to keep going now. He can't turn around and go back, you know. So it gave me a real purpose in life. I had no idea.
So, here, I say go on.
Well, once I got into the monastery, I really thought I'd stay there for life. But along the way, I met somebody who called me about the Shroud, wanted some information. And it was a woman from Ohio who wanted to know more about the Shroud. And make a long story short, one thing led to another. I moved to Columbus, Ohio, where she up. And we ended up getting married and doing Shroud research together. And I might point out that, I had been, by the time I left for Columbus, I had been in Shroud research for 20-something years. And I firmly believe and know that we ended up doing research together that we would have never been able to do had I stayed in the monastery. So I believe I was supposed to be in the monastery for a time, but I also believe I was supposed to leave it when I get. So the Shroud really has become the biggest single most important factor in my life, and is just ever since I came across it, my life has never been the same. I got, like Mark, I just got deeper and deeper into it. My basement is a Shroud museum now. I got one of the largest personal English language collections in the world. I collected everything I could get my hands on, including the negative stuff, because I wanted to know what the other side was saying. At first, I was a little skeptical. Oh, that they don't know what they're talking about, so I don't need to pay attention. I thought, no, I need to know what they're saying. So I started collecting the negative stuff as well. And I must say, I haven't run across a good skeptical argument yet that can't be answered. So the Shroud has just become a focal point. Focal point in my life, and I know I'll be doing it the rest of my life. So.
And for those who don't know, you lost Sue how many years ago now? I'm sorry. You lost Sue how many years?
I lost Sue in 2009 to breast cancer, unfortunately.
How old were you guys, right?
Well, she had 2 kids, and the older one was a little worried about mom getting married, so we didn't get married at first, but we officially got married in 2005. So officially we were married about 4 years, but we were together about 2.
Okay, I think it's probably me.
Russ? Well, what's been impressing me lately, again, looking at the Shroud as a mirror of the gospel. You know those mirrors that magnify, right? Look at your face, boom. It's hot. Well, I think that's what the Shroud does. The scriptures are tremendously understated. So, for instance, then Pilate had Jesus scourged. That's it. But then with the Shroud, it expands and lets you see what that scourging is all about and how he was brutalized. Then it says, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Die, that's it. I mean, yet there's no description of how he died. This is profoundly important, is to understand the absolute brutality of crucifixion. I mean, why didn't they just stab him with a sword, cut his head off? Why did Jesus have to go through this horrific ordeal of crucifixion? And so the Shroud is significant, is because it is the first gospel. And as the first gospel, it is a gospel written unwitted, speaks every language, has no need to be translated, speaks to every level. 5-year-old can look at it, who can't even read, and says, "Look, Mom, look, Daddy, there's Jesus." A teenager can get hooked into the science and say, "Wow, this is really cool." But then the academic, the intellectual, the theologian can take it as deep as they want to go. So the Shroud, to me, the Shroud is a companion to the Bible. It expands where the scripture itself is understated. So again, that verse, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And then so now we had an understanding of how he died. But let's unpack that other word. While we were yet sinners. Oh, you're going to want to open up that word. You want to look in that box? Whoa, there's some nasty stuff in there. But this is really important because why, the question is, why was Jesus so horrifically brutalized? Why did the Father allow that to happen? Why did Jesus willingly go through it? And the answer is this, is because the extreme nature of the crucifixion was necessary because of the depth of human sin. And then when you imagine some of the things that people are guilty of, you know they should be they should be on death row right now for what they've committed. But here's the beauty of it is that this is the part that you need to communicate to others is that the extreme nature of the crucifixion of Jesus means that when Jesus paid it all, he paid it all. There's no sin that is beyond God's forgiveness because Jesus has paid for it. And someone might say, well, I did this and I did that. How could God ever accept me? How could God ever love me? It doesn't matter. It's been paid for. Whether, I did that. Well, you could be Ted Bundy. It doesn't matter. It's been paid for. And that's the significance of the shroud. Where the scripture is understated, the shroud magnifies it and reveals it as a first gospel. That's how I see it.
So thank you.
Yeah, question over here. Yes, cheers.
Okay, so of course, all of us here are believers, and we know. So why do we? What do you think it would take to say that we have definitive proof that the shroud is authentic? What would we have to do? What would the scientists have to prove? What would we all have to prove to the world to have definitive proof to make the world believe that this is the shroud of Jesus? And what was my second part? And why do you think that? Do you think that this is the time that God wants this to happen, or what is the time? Is this still coming in the future, or is this now? Why? It seems like now we're getting a lot closer to this being revealed to the world. And is the time now, or is it still sometime in the future?
Yeah, go ahead, Warren. I'm going to ask you guys to share the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Come to my cup on 9 o'clock on Saturday. I'll deal with the first part of your question. Well, pizza car, and now, who knows, but we're in his eyes. Jesus didn't even know.
It's still the end, so just say that we have no scripture to keep. We're going to start believing that this is the real thing.
Yeah. His eyes sounded good, bro.
I would just add, being faster, everyone's risk tolerance is different. How much do you need to know about anything before you're willing to make a decision? How much do you need to know about how my American Airlines plane works before I actually walk onto it and fly home? People have different risk tolerances. What I think is remarkable is you need to know precious little to actually become a Christian. We know a lot more about the shroud than many people know when they finally make a decision to commit their lives to Christ. I mean, think about how little you actually have to know. You don't need to know theology. You don't have to read the Bible. But by the proclamation of the deity, death, and resurrection of Christ, you can make a decision right where you're at to follow him as your Savior, and it could transform your life. I was with R.T. Kendall recently, the pastor of many years in London. I preached for him in Notting Hill at Kensington Temple. And he made a remarkable statement that it's lingered with me, that how little we actually have to know to become a Christian, and all of Bible study the rest of our life is trying to figure out what happened to us at the moment of conversion. And I've always thought that was very well said, that really our whole walk with Christ is what happened to us at that moment. And for me, it's really Pascal's wager. It's like there's no downside to learning about the shroud. There's only upside, I think, as Mark has already mentioned. And I think for many people, no evidence will ever be enough, though, for them to believe. I deal with this, and especially Bible scholars, we could have Jesus, we could have a video recording and Jesus rising from the dead, and they would find a reason to not believe in it. And so that's really not a problem with the evidence or the material. That's really a mirror into that person's heart. They're just unwilling to accept that evidence because the claim that evidence has on their life. What's fascinating to me, though, is I do deal with many archaeologists. I visit many archaeological digs. I speak at many archaeological functions. And one thing I can speak to is as we get closer to the second coming of Jesus Christ, I really believe there's a controlled revelation of God revealing himself in technology as we get closer and closer to his return. I know this from archaeologists who are using many of the new technologies to go back through digs, even trash heaps of digs that have belonged and closed. You find new things through wet sifting, dry sifting, and then analyzing those through the equivalent of CAT scan technology to see what's really written there. And it's really impressive what's happening. And so, but I think everyone is going to have to deal with that themselves. I mean, we have a embarrassment of riches right now of evidence for the Christian faith, and yet many still deny it. And so our job, though, is not to do the Holy Spirit's job. Our job is to present the evidence. It's the Holy Spirit's job to convert hearts, and he's good at his job.
I don't think we never, no matter how much evidence we gather, I don't think we'd ever reach a point where, even a majority of people would say, okay, it's authentic. Like he was saying, people that don't want to believe are going to find a reason not to believe. And no amount of evidence is ever going to convince them. I think somebody said, basically enough light to believe in him, but for people that don't want to believe, there's enough there's enough darkness there that you can grab onto something and come up with an excuse not to believe. I know Barry Schwartz used to say, if God himself came down, pointed in the shroud and said, that's me, some people would believe it, So I don't think we'd ever reach the point. It comes down to a matter of faith, basically. It's not needed for our faith, but it's important. It's significant. But it's not a substitute for faith. I think it complements it. But I don't think it detracts from its importance. I think it's a gift, simply a gift from God, and we ought to accept it as a gift. Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever. I think the shroud remains a mystery. It'll always be a mystery. All the deep things of God are all mysteries. Anyone want to walk me through how the Word of God becomes flesh? How does Jesus transform into a flash of light and disappear? I mean, how do you feed 5,000 people with a boy's lunch? How do you calm a storm with a simple command? These are, the church calls them miracles, but they're all mysteries. And so, to my opinion, the shroud will always be a mystery, and I think that's just the way that God does. There's a proverb that says that it is the glory of kings, the glory of God that conceal a matter is the glory of kings to search it out. Our job is to search it out. That doesn't mean we're going to find every answer, but in the searching we find that which encourages us and builds our faith. I've always said that I think that the shroud, it was never meant to be a substitute for faith. And so I think as far as evidence goes, you've heard the expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I think the shroud takes you right up to the water's edge, but it's still going to require a step of faith to believe that image that's on that linen cloth is a real living Christ and sits at the right hand of the Father, and he is coming back soon. Now, as far as when, I don't know, but all I know is that we're in that exponential curve, and when you think of the rate of change and the increase of knowledge, imagine how much change occurred between the 5th and 6th centuries. Nothing. Okay. Imagine now we're going into the industrial age, into the information age, and now we're into whatever you're calling this age, artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency and everything else. We're, the exponential curve. We're vertical. We're straight up. Where our total knowledge base is doubling. What, every 6 months now? I think it's bad. More than, I think it's sooner than this. Yeah, so as far as when the Lord returns, I don't know. But I do know this. As soon as it was yesterday.
All right, let's come over here. Another question or two, and if you don't ask in there, I don't want. So,
Hi guys. Couple weeks ago I said, hey, we're having the Shroud conference. Could we talk about testing the Shroud and maybe discuss it in a public forum? And you all like, no, let's not go there. It's not right, not the right time. I was like, yeah, I really think it is the right time. Is with you Pope, and the Pope controls when they test out. And I do recall that Mr. Antonacci has written a book called Test the Shroud. And for the longest time, you were advocating testing the Shroud and with the new technologies, because you think about it, when Stirp happened in 1978, and here we are in 2025, then there's been a revolution in scientific and just technology in general that I am just so high on having the Shroud at least be tested in a modern environment. And Barry used to say that they had this huge truck full of equipment that they had to unpack when they were doing Stirp in 1978. And now it would fit in a minivan, even less space than they would need to test the Shroud and the new equipment. So anyway, I just wanted to just bring that up, maybe discuss it here.
Sorry, with you, Mark. Hello, Drew. Like I said to her, I'll also be talking at 4 o'clock to the day session. And you can't summarize it in 2 minutes, But it's attend the sessions, you'll hear the whole event. You can't really summarize in 45 minutes, but I can't give a 45-minute talk right now, I just did the one figure, yeah, but the old mention, it goes on and on. So, but sure, it's always if you got a good idea, whether you have a new pope or not. I always thought that any pope who knew the whole story would go for it. It's just we got to get the whole story together and make it clear. It's hard to do that in just 5 minutes. You got to really lay it out, but we're getting there.
all right, moment, keep that chirp. That's about up that port.
Who our kindness is Jeannie was there. What happened to the girl?
We soon found we could argue about a lot of other things. You? She's an old neighbor of mine, and we still bump into each other all the time. I bet you. Thanks, Brett.
All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up, but let me ask one more question. So, to you four gentlemen, in all your work with the Shroud, has this cost you anything?
Oh, yeah. A lot of time you miss with your family, a lot of money. You don't make any money at this, you lose money at this. Russ probably makes more, but I sure it does, but it's got to put long-term benefits.
Yeah.
I don't think in those terms, Chuck. When I surrendered to the ministry, I gave my all.
Yeah.
So I don't even think of those terms, honestly, because I'm here for it, and I am married to an amazing super mom who is co-called to this work. So, but conferences like this, and I want to say this, are not easy to put on, and so I just commend all of you who organized it, and thank you all so much for getting. I'm so affirmed to continue our contributions and to stay in the fight. And so many of you encouraged me, and I just want to thank you. And I want to publicly thank Joe Marino for being my lifeline every time I needed Dakota. And Joe's become such a sweet friend. And you're get all of this, Joe. So thank you.
No, I'd never thought of it in terms of cost. It's been, I've gained so much from it. First of all, I'm just thankful that God has called me to propagate it and propagate in the good sense, because usually that term has negative connotations. But it's nice having something so passionate in my life, because I see a lot of people that go through life but have a passion, and their life is very dreary. And my life is just so interesting now, especially since I ended up taking over Barry Schwartz's presidency at Stera and editor of Shroud.com. I can't accomplish as much as he did by himself. I do have a webmaster, thank goodness, because I'm just not talented in that area. But no, it's been interesting, fascinating ever since I saw that first book in 1977, and it's just been a blessing to me. I don't feel like there's been a cost. Yeah.
It's good to have a supportive spouse. We couldn't do this if we didn't, because it is a lifelong commitment. You're living, breathing Shroud 24/7 when you get focused on it like this, and especially your 5 book. And it's I have a book for sale.
Shouting out, like, for the world greatest unsolved mysteries.
No, it's all consuming, you know. I mean, but it's fun. It's great. It's such. I just really want to encourage you. It's the easiest way to share your faith. You know, so many people have a hard time evangelizing and sharing their faith with somebody. Why don't they say, hey, you know, the Shroud of Turin is real. It's considered one of the greatest mysteries of all time. I'm doing some reading on it. It's really amazing. But you know, the cool thing about the Shroud is you cannot talk about the Shroud without talking about Jesus. That's impossible. And so it's a really, really a very disarming way of sharing your faith. And so, I think more and more people should understand that. So anyways, that's it.
All right, you can hang on to that. Russ Breault, Joe Marino, Jeremiah Johnston, and Mark Antonacci. That's
All right, take it ahead, you guys. Well, thank you for being here today. I know some of you are coming back tomorrow, the weekend. It's assuming we're on the 40 Thursday. God bless you. Thank you for being here. Be safe.